Science and Technology at Stanford University. I'm joined by Carlin Wing and Raiford Guins. They'll introduce themselves when they talk. The common project we have is a book that we're co-editing, which we expect to be published by Bloomsbury Academic Press in 2022. Its working title is Feeling the Game, Thinking Critically About EA Sports FIFA Series. Our plan is to feature 11 essays. I wonder why 11 essays on the history of electronic arts, long-running FIFA football series of games. So you're probably asking, why a book on FIFA? We want to address two big problems in game studies. The first problem is the generally underdeveloped state of historical writing about games. The second problem is a curious and deep disinterest in in game studies for sports games. Not just the history of sports games, but anything about sports games. The only major collection of work on this subject is a book called Sports Video Games that was published by MIT Press a few years ago. So in a nutshell, our mission in producing this book is to bring both history and sports to game studies through the lens of FIFA. We're focusing on the FIFA series as our subject matter for several reasons. Its status as a long-running series, its roots go back nearly 30 years. Success in the marketplace, of course, world popularity and impact, and finally, a tantalizing mix of technology, sports, player engagement, social, political, gender, and cultural contexts. One last thing before we go to our individual topics. You might be able to help us with something. At least I hope you will be able to help us with something. We've been very eager but unsuccessful in finding a contributor to write about the FIFA series in a global context, specifically FIFA in Africa, some dimension of the the experience of FIFA in Africa. If you or somebody you know about might be a worthy contender to write an essay about this and for our book, please feel free to reach out to us later. And with that, I'll hand it over to Carlin.
Thanks, Henry. Hi, everyone. My name is Carlin Wing. I'm a professor of media studies at Scripps College, where I teach courses on game design and digital media and new media. I'm joining you today from Los Angeles, land that is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrieleno and Tongva peoples. And I'm really glad to be joining you today. And I put my Twitter handle on the title slide. So just to echo Henry's call out, if one of the ways you want to reach out to us is that you can DM me that way. So I'm currently working on a book called Bounce, A History of Balls, Walls, and Gaming Bodies, which follows an array of bouncing balls through the histories of electronic and non-electronic games. So along with co-editing this volume, my job in the chapter I'm contributing is to address the role of the ball and the bounce in FIFA, because that's what my kind of larger project is looking at. Bouncing balls and other bouncing, careening, and rebounding objects play central roles in a vast number of video games. I'm sure this is not a surprise to any of the people listening. In fact, bounce programs are so fundamental to computing that I think of them as a kind of common sense of computer graphics. So for me, looking at how the ball bounces in FIFA and other sports simulations is a way of thinking about the way a game's mechanics and graphics work together to create what Steve Swink calls game feel. So this is the combination of real-time control, simulated space, and polish that makes a game really kind of pleasurable to play. So if you are a longtime FIFA player, you'll know the game's feel was historically negatively compared to its main competitor in the market, Pro Evolution Soccer, or PES. And that EA made a big deal of getting the physics right. In 2014, they discovered this lurking error in the drag coefficient that had been causing the ball to float in frustrating ways for years. And this is something you still see every year with each new release. There's some new emphasis on the real ball physics or on the kind of ability to contact the ball or manipulate it in a more nuanced, more real way. Can you go ahead and play the next clip? I realized that I should have queued that up. I forgot about the queuing. On your end, actually, and actually, can you skip if you can skip a couple slightly forgot about the queuing. It should be the second video now. Perfect. So along with being the primary point for experiencing a sense of contact, the ball is also the object that the AI avatar's movements are pegged to. This is a practice match where the graphic of the ball failed to appear. And what I like about this glitch is the way it makes clear that distinction between the graphics and the mechanics, and that, right, the avatars don't need the visual graphics. They know exactly where the ball was, whereas I was left completely bewildered and unable to track the main object of the game. Watching the AI players flock around the ball brings me towards another kind of bounce that is fundamental to FIFA, although it's a little more behind the scenes. EA's pursuit of realism is grounded in its exclusive licensing agreement with FIFA, the football. No, I didn't. I took out my little thing. Anyway, with FIFA, the international organization, and with other leagues, which among other things include the rights to use the organization's name and to capture and use professional footballers' likenesses. So the avatars in the game are modeled on professional players both behaviorally and visually. To do this, the company employs thousands of people to watch every league, national, and international football match live and keep running ratings of players on pass accuracy, shooting, passing, dribbling, defense, physical capacity. And then that's how they come up with the ratings that they refresh with each annual release. In addition to this, a special motion capture crew travels from team to team scanning player likenesses. Can I have the next slide, please? So there's a special team that travels around scanning the heads of players, while back in Vancouver, which is what you're looking at here, another crew ushers stars and stand-ins through movement sequences laid out on motion capture dance cards in one of the largest studios in the world. Since turning to motion capture animation in 1997, FIFA has depended on it more than most games. So there are lots of video games that don't need motion capture, or that maybe use a little bit, but it's not kind of fundamental. Motion capture is really what, since they brought it into the game in '97, motion capture is the fundamental foundation, I would say, for this game. Can I have the next slide? So this software, the bounce of the light off the balls positioned at marker points on motion capture suits is channeled through 3D animation software, which is in turn connected to an AI system to render avatars recognizable as both specific soccer stars, so Lionel Messi, or avatars that are more generalized but recognizable as specific kinds of players from this team, players from a women's or men's team. So I will just take 1 minute to wrap up. So here, bounce is the basis for simulating ball physics and body physics. So I included this image just because one of the things I'm writing about here is the introduction of women to FIFA in 2016, and what about the motion capture process might have contributed to it taking so long for EA to include them, and might contribute to the company's continued failure to include them in Ultimate Mode. So basically, to conclude, when you create a simulated world, you get to create the physics, which means that looking at how the ball bounces and how the player's hair does or doesn't bounce and how the motion capture data is created and processed opens a window into the different kinds of translations that take place during the process of simulating the movement of footballers and football. Thank you very much.
Go for it, Ray. You're muted, Ray.
Sorry about that. Too many screens in front of me, too many buttons. Hi, thank you very much for this panel. I'm really excited to be here. Can I please have the first slide? My name is Raiford Guin. I'm a professor and chair of cinema and media studies at Indiana University, Bloomington. And I'm going to share what I hope will be the chapter that I'm contributing to the collection. And next slide, please. There's my title, Playing Games with My Feelings. I'm interested in really big questions. Why do video games matter to us? How are they meaningful and significant to and in our lives? How are they materials for constructing self, identity, and worldviews? How might they be communicative? And how are they evocative objects? Can you please press slide advance? I've got a little note down below I want to share before we go. I'm drawing basically kind of an autobiographical essay. So I'm sharing my feelings and my experiences of playing as Leeds United since 1996 with FIFA. That's what I'm hoping to write about for the collection. But today I want to talk about a particular event that took place, and I want to try to make sense of that event for us here today. So next slide, please. Can we have the next slide, please? Oh, thank you. Okay. If you can, just take a look at some of the text as I read this. On March 15th, 2020, I, like many Leeds United supporters, celebrated goals scored in a FIFA 20 watch party for the suspended away fixture against Cardiff City due to the coronavirus lockdown in the UK. Cardiff City away was eventually played on June 21st, but behind closed doors. We lost 2-0 in that reality. On March 15th in FIFA, we won 3-1. Patrick Bamford scored a brace. Jack Harrison scored from an amazing free kick. The watch party for the fixture was titled FIFA 20 Decides. The live gameplay was hosted by the official Facebook page of Leeds United Football Club. It received 600 shares and over 120,000 views by the half. Around 300,000 people total, that's nearly the population of Iceland, watched, and the match generated close to 3,000 comments. Next slide, please. Comments ranged from supporters sharing their disbelief from watching the entire 30-minute match. Can't believe I just sat and watched that and cheered when the final whistle went. And I watched this game and shouted at my phone 10 times. To one strikingly similar to what could be witnessed on supporter pages or at a pub after a match. Big 3 points today. Shame to not keep clean sheets going, but at least Bamford's back in form. And what a goal from Harrison. A win against Fulham and the league is ours. And what a game, lads. Harrison, man of the match for me with that free kick. Bittersweet lines punctuated the sorry state of the situation. Anyone to peacock for a victory pint. When one now longs for the ordinariness of having a drink at a pub, along with utter appreciation for filling an emotional void left by the suspension of the league. Thanks for this. Made my weekend a little better. Next slide, please. All of our remaining fixtures before the suspension was lifted were played under the moniker FIFA 20 Decides. Many supporters note their affection. Comments from the Leeds vs Stoke City match on April 10th, nearly a month in, make this point well. I must be missing footy. Got right into this. I can't believe how much I invest in these simulated games. We should have bloody been there to enjoy. I know I said I'd send you to the game, but this will have to do. Closest we'll get to the game today. Next slide, please. The league and EA Sports FIFA, at least, and via Facebook, ended as regularly scheduled. At the final match on March 2nd, the championship trophy was lifted and paraded around the ground to 176,000 in attendance. No doubt a new crowd record at Ellen Road, which only holds close to 37,000. Not all supporters regarded this experience as expressive of something positive. One watcher had this to say, "This is truly heartbreaking. On a day that would have been a celebration like no other, we are reduced to watching a pointless virtual nonsense that has no relevance." Next slide, please. What are we to make of this moment when the club utilizes gameplay as a means to enjoy that match day feeling and as a social platform? Is it really nonsense and of no relevance whatsoever? Here are my thoughts. The club's adoption of FIFA 20 Decides implies a sensitivity towards supporters at a moment of global crisis. FIFA 20 became an intermediate substance, a carrier like oil for the practice of painting. A sensual form worked to still feel connected to a community. Those of us watching live were doing so amongst other supporters, possibly even players, commenting on gameplay, plays, in-game players, and of course, each other's comments. Coming together, performing the social, often rarely practiced within social media. Sharing a distributed place, stories, and emotions, being together when forced apart. Next slide, please. I construe FIFA 20 Decides as a peculiar social substance, mixing feelings plied to the maintenance of relationships. What constitutes the feeling of supporting a club, identifying with a club, when the common taken for granted melange of practices like going to a match, discussing events in a pub face-to-face are taken away, made forbidden for the safety of all. The world of football is shown to be fragile, just like so many other aspects of life, our imagined and lived communities neither impervious to infection nor exempt from death. Only war and disasters have forced the cancellation or prolonged postponement of matches, seasons, and cups. With pitches the world being invaded by the virus, FIFA 20 Decides sustained a culture of supporters. It was all we had in the absence of league play, a means to make do with the prolonged feelings of deflation when the rhythm for living ground to a halt. What jolted a heightened perceptiveness, for me at least, is the ordinary, a game of FIFA 20 being put to extraordinary affect. FIFA 20 as a distillment of experience, concentrating, refining our feelings. Respite for 30 minutes. A place to go when we cannot. For a period of time, our sensorium had to adjust to watching Leeds United only as a FIFA 20 game. We had another to make that experience only a game, but rather it was the only game, given the traumatic circumstances of having our life and our love ripped from us. Each comment posted in Facebook became a gesture of attachment, like a supporter tapping you on the shoulder to express their disbelief at a bad call by the official. Watching was exhilarating, offering a felt sense of match day. FIFA 20 Decides gave us a place and reason to gather, to partake in a collective affective response to absence, a promise of proximity through the intimacy of gameplay. This experience was, for me at least, never trivial or inconsequential, but overwhelmingly meaningful, alive, and rich with feeling. It was common ground for the dislocated. Thank you.
Well, hello, it's me again. In a sentence, my research for this book is about the FIFA engine and its discontents. So FIFA football requires players to know more than how football is played. They need to understand how the simulation works, how the game works. How do players do that? How do they discover, verify, and share information, in particular about problems with the game software, especially when developers have not revealed in detail how that software works? How do players justify and express their discontent when game glitches emerge? Does that communication affect their relationship with the game and with the developers? My study is organized around a moment. It involved FIFA 16 specifically and took place during the summer of 2017. My specific focus on the game within the game is that game within the game called FIFA Ultimate Team, or simply FUT. FUT adds to FIFA a system for assembling and managing teams based on collecting player cards. The system mixes collecting, fantasy football, management simulation, and so forth. It was introduced in 2006 as an add-on and became part of the launch version of FIFA with 2012. You might think of it as a free add-on to the game, but only in what has become the usual sense of free for games, that is not free, or rather free only for players with the self-discipline not to buy additional content from the online store. For most players, paying is part of playing FUT. What happened in the summer of 2017, quite simply, is that FIFA 16 broke. FUT is about buying and selling players with the goal of assembling an ultimate team. Players not only trade, but they buy packs of teams and players, and they do that either through in-game currency that they earn by playing, or by paying real money, bringing out their wallet, their credit card, and buying packs that they can open for hopefully very good players. By the way, FIFA Ultimate Team produced just Ultimate Team for FIFA, not including the Ultimate Team for Madden Football, produced nearly 15% of the company's overall revenue in 2018, so it's worked out pretty well for EA. So you collect players to build a fantasy team, and when you do this, there are, of course, a number of rules and ways that the players interact. Questions about these interactions and how they work have troubled the Ultimate Team player community since the first download of the add-on in early 2009. Speculations and disagreements among players who suspected problems with the system had remarkably little impact over the years on FUT's commercial success. I say remarkable because despite all kinds of issues with what the effects were of things like what they call chemistry and so forth, people kept paying for players even when they suspected things weren't working correctly. When the so-called fitness and chemistry glitches were proven to exist in FIFA 17, unfortunately I don't have time to go into the details, but take my word for it, these were fundamental glitches in the game. Problems with FUT could no longer be ignored. Chemistry was an essential part of putting a team together. It affected whether you would buy a player or whether you would apply a special chemistry card to that player to make that player even better. That meant, in many cases, paying with virtual or real currency to improve your team, assuming you understood the effects of chemistry and knew what to expect in terms of results for that investment. Well, time doesn't permit me to tell you the details, but basically the social media influencer, Nepenthes, and a player with the game handle Righteous Onyx turned FIFA in summer 2017 into a kind of laboratory for determining if fitness and chemistry actually worked the way they were supposed to, and they proved in June 2017 that it absolutely did not. That this very important aspect of the game simply wasn't doing what players were expecting it to do. Suffice it to say, when the system was shown to have broken down, many players felt cheated. Here's the bottom line. The proven chemistry glitch was a big problem for EA. It was more than a gameplay bug. Inform and other expensive special cards were really the motors of the pay-to-play system as I've described it, and they didn't work. Players accused EA of deception, incompetence, and fraud. They threatened lawsuits, or even more revealingly, they asked for free packs in compensation for this problem. Following a sequence of apologies, statements, and bug fixes, EA responded. It promised to share more about what they call the deeper mechanics of Ultimate Team. When a patch was released to fix the issues, the promise was repeated. We will be sharing information on some of the deeper mechanics of Ultimate Team as we move towards the launch of FIFA 17. So they said, we promise we'll do better in the future. Well, to wrap up, what fascinates me here is the mix of testing, analysis, and game theory about the glitches performed by the players. What the players did to learn about the game and discover things about the game that the developer, EA, had not revealed to them. While blasting EA, several of the FUT Redditors and people in the forums and so on recognized quite openly that players had worked together productively and that this was a really cool thing. EA, for its part, cautiously embraced the player community's discontent, and they did respond to it. As one developer put it, we're looking for actionable feedback. They took what the players told them and they changed the game. Studying interactions like these among players and game developers is an example of an area of technology studies, that's the field I come out of, called user studies. User studies take us past the idea that companies develop and deliver technologies in a completely finished form, that it then never changes. Instead, users work on these technologies. They find new uses, they tinker, they alter, they change, they repurpose. Some users even, called lead users by a scholar named Eric von Hippel, push technologies to the edge of their performance, make necessary improvements, and feed this information back to developers and manufacturers who in turn make changes based on that. So if we think of FIFA not just as a game, but as a technological system, the response to FIFA 16's glitches is basically an episode in user studies, and that's what I'll be exploring in my essay. Anyway, I hope that this all too brief summary gives you an idea of the kinds of questions I'm trying to answer by looking at the history of the FIFA series. And with that, I'm finished, and I wonder if we have time for any questions. So, if we have a way. Oh, I thought there was a way. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought there was a way for people to ask us questions. How about? Well, do we have what, about 5 more minutes? Well, let me repeat what I said earlier. That if there is someone watching this who works in game studies, possibly even a developer, maybe somebody who represents a community of players and would be interested in writing about FIFA in the African context, or perhaps a topic related to that, please reach out. I saw that Carlin gave her contact information. So, but really, you can reach out to any one of us and let us know. Also, if you let us know about somebody who might be a good contributor, feel free to volunteer somebody else, which is a honored way of handling that. Carlin or Ray, do you have anything you'd like to add about the book?
It's going to be fantastic. I hope. what I mean, I know it sounds really kind of, overconfident and arrogant to say something like that, but it's just we're trying to put together a collection to bring in a lot of different perspectives. So we've got a really robust team that we've managed to field for this particular collection. And I think there hasn't been a book that's attempting to do a study of an entire game series that has gone for so long. So I think the endurance of this particular game series really warrants close investigation, close examination, like we hope to do. And I would hope that this sort of sets a precedent, and we could see other books around game series and sports titles in particular in the future. So I think that I'm excited about this book. I'm excited to work with everyone here, but also all the contributors. And I look forward to how the book eventually gets received from the many people who play FIFA across the globe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have anything to add to that, because that sums it up pretty well. I think one reason that I was, and I know we were excited to have this opportunity today, is because of how popular FIFA is. I mean, it's a massively popular game around the world, and one thing the organizers told us is that it's one of the most popular games on the continent, and that to me is really compelling. I'm coming at this from a sports background, so Ray and Henry kind of cajoled me into games some number of years ago, and here I still am. And I got, as someone who didn't come in from the point of perspective of someone who's already playing FIFA, what really fascinates me about it is something that was mentioned in the last panel, which is just that the video game industry is growing so fast, and it both is kind of taking the place, or it's following the same arc that the sports industry followed in the 19th century as a kind of cultural space where play and ritual and all these kinds of geopolitical and then interpersonal kind of waged and worked out, and it's also it's like following the sports trajectory on the one hand, and then from a media studies perspective, on the last panel, I think I heard that the industry is now bigger in Africa than cinema, right, or than other media industries, and that's something I think that games is also challenging around the world. That as a media form that has pulled in music, right, music licensing, it's pulled in history of cinema and animation, it's pulled in the history of sports, and so FIFA gives us this really amazing object to look at that trajectory as it's been over since 1994. So, I mean, decades now. So that's what compels me, is that we have this series that lets us kind of explore that arc.
And I'll just quickly slip in one last point that makes me think back to Henry's paper when he talks about foot as a game within a game. I'm not even sure I think of FIFA as a game any longer. I've started to refer to it as a place. I use the term substance, and I'm wondering if the more we work on this and what our contributors have to say, if we realize we're not even sure what our object is in certain cases. And I think that's very exciting.
Well, okay. I think we're just about at time now. I hope we've given you an idea of what people in game studies do with games, and what we write about. I hope you're interested enough that you'll look for this book in a bookstore or online about a year and a half from now. And thank you very much for the time that you've given us.
Thank you.